The stranger at my mother's hospital door had her eyes. Not similar, not reminiscent. Hers, that specific shade of gray-green that I had spent 40 years believing only existed in two people on Earth, my mother and me. I should have said something. Instead, I just stood there holding a cup of terrible vending machine coffee while my entire life rearranged itself without my permission. My name is Rachel Dunn. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, in a beige colonial on Prescott Street, with a mother who made good soup, kept a clean house, and never, not once in 4 decades, seemed like a woman with a secret. Her name was Margaret. Everyone called her Maggie. She was a school librarian for 31 years. She had reading glasses on a beaded chain. She grew tomatoes in the backyard that never quite ripened the way she wanted. She was meticulous about thank you notes and deeply suspicious of people who didn't use coasters. She was also, apparently, a woman I did not know at all. My father, Robert, died in 2009. Heart attack. Quick, devastating. After that, it was just the two of us. Me and Mom. My brother Danny had moved to Portland years earlier, and though we loved each other, we weren't close in the daily phone call kind of way. Mom and I were, or I thought we were. The call came on a Wednesday in October. Mom had been declining for 8 months, ovarian cancer, stage 3 at diagnosis, and by the time October arrived, we had moved past the language of treatment and into the quieter, heavier language of comfort care. I had taken family leave from my job. I drove 40 minutes each way to the hospice facility in Medina every single day. I was her person. I had always been her person. That Wednesday, the nurse called me in the early afternoon and said to come soon. Mom had taken a turn. Her breathing had changed. I grabbed my coat and my keys and I drove there with my hands shaking the whole way. When I got to the hallway outside her room, he was standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 45 or 46, dark hair going silver at the temples. And those eyes. He was holding flowers, carnations, white, slightly wilted, like he'd been traveling with them. He was looking at the door to room 114 with an expression I recognized, because I had been wearing it for 8 months. Grief bracing itself, I stopped walking. He turned and looked at me, and something crossed his face, recognition almost, like he'd seen a photo of me before. He said, "You must be Rachel." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "My name is Thomas Callahan." He paused. He looked back at the door. Maggie is my mother too. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it wasn't graceful. I told him he had the wrong room. I told him that wasn't possible. I told him, and I'm not proud of this, that whatever he was doing here, this was not the time, and if he was some kind of scammer who preyed on families and hospitals, then I would call security before he could blink. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He just reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Old, cream-colored. He held it out to me. Inside was a letter, handwritten, in my mother's handwriting. I knew every curl of it. Dated March 1977. Thomas, I think about you every single day. I hope the Callahans are good to you. I hope you're happy. I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep you. You will always be mine, even if I can never say it out loud. The letter was signed with a small, careful M. I sat down on a bench in that hallway and I read it 4 times. My mother had given up a child before I was born, a son. She had been, based on the math, barely 19 years old. She had carried this for 54 years, and she had never told me. Thomas had found her 6 months earlier. He told me this in the hallway in low, careful sentences, watching my face the whole time, clearly aware of how fragile this moment was. He'd been adopted at birth by a family in western Pennsylvania. Good people, he said. Genuinely good. He grew up knowing he was adopted, He never felt desperate to search. Then he turned 45, and his adoptive mother passed away, and something shifted. He said it wasn't urgency exactly, more like permission. Like he'd been waiting for a door to be unlocked. He used one of the DNA registry services. He matched with a second cousin on my mother's side, a woman none of us were close to, a distant branch of the family tree. That woman connected some dots, made some quiet inquiries, and eventually, Thomas had a name. Margaret Dunn, née Holloway, Akron, Ohio. He'd written her a letter. Physical mail, sent to her home address. Mom had written back within a week. They had been corresponding for 6 months, letters at first, then phone calls. He had driven to Akron twice to meet her at a cafe near her house, a cafe I drove past every week and never thought twice about. My mother had been sitting across a table from her secret son, drinking coffee, learning who he'd become, and she never said a word to me. That part, honestly, hurt more than the secret itself. The nurse came out and told us both that Mom was awake and asking for Rachel. Thomas took a small step back. Immediately, no hesitation, he said, "Go, please, I can wait." I looked at him for a moment. Those eyes, my eyes. I went inside. Mom looked small in the bed. She always had a kind of sturdy quality to her, that practical Midwestern solidity, and watching it diminish over those 8 months had been its own long grief. She turned her head when I came in, and something in her face shifted, relief, and underneath it, something that looked a lot like the beginning of a confession. I sat beside her. I took her hand. She said, "You saw him." I said, "Mom." She said, "I wanted to tell you so many times. I had 1,000 questions. I asked none of them. Not then." I just held her hand and said, "Do you want to see him?" I went back to the hallway and I told Thomas to come in. I stood in the corner of that room for the next 2 hours, and I watched my mother hold her son's hand for the first and last time. He sat in the chair I always sat in. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. She kept touching his face, his hair, the way mothers do with small children, checking that they're real. He let her. He was steady and gentle, and, this is the part that undid me, he called her Mom. Once. Quietly, near the end, she made a sound I'd never heard her make before, like something that had been locked for 50 years finally opening. She died the next morning, just before 6. Thomas and I were both there. Danny had driven in overnight and was standing at the foot of the bed. Mom was unconscious by then, just her breathing, slowing, and then not. The 3 of us stood in that room in the early gray light, and none of us said anything for a long time. Here is what I pieced together in the weeks after, from the letters Thomas shared with me and from a conversation with my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, who had known the whole time and wept when I called her. 1976. My mother was 18 years old and in love with a boy named Kevin Callahan. He was 20, charming, Catholic, from a family in Canton who thought Maggie Holloway was entirely unsuitable for their son. When she got pregnant, Kevin's parents made their position clear. Kevin, who was weak in the specific way that certain charming young men are weak, agreed with them. My mother's own parents, my grandparents, both gone now, were deeply religious and deeply ashamed. There was no discussion of keeping the child. The arrangement was made. She delivered Thomas in February 1977 at a hospital in Cleveland, away from everyone she knew, and he was placed with adoptive parents before she was discharged. She went home. She never spoke of it again. She met my father 2 years later. She built her careful, clean, coaster-using life. She became the woman I knew. But she wrote in one letter to Thomas, "I counted every birthday, every single one. 45 birthdays, counted alone in silence. I'm still not entirely sure how to hold that." Now here's the part where it got complicated. About a week after the funeral, my brother Danny called me. He'd been doing some thinking, he said. Some research. He wanted to talk about the will. Mom's estate wasn't enormous. The house, some savings, a small life insurance policy. She'd had a lawyer draw up a will years ago, and Danny and I were named equally. She had revised that will in August, 3 months after she and Thomas started speaking on the phone. 2 months before she went into hospice, the revised will divided the estate 3 ways, equal thirds: Danny, Rachel, Thomas. Danny was not pleased. Danny felt, and he used this word, ambushed. He wanted to contest it. He wanted me to contest it with him. He made arguments about undue influence, about a dying woman being manipulated by a stranger, about the principle of the thing. I listened to him for a long time. Then I said, Danny, she counted his birthday every year for 45 years. I think she knew what she was doing. Danny didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that, but he didn't contest the will. I met Thomas for coffee in November, a place in Medina, neutral territory, 2 months after the funeral. We were both still raw and careful around each other. He brought his wife, Sandra, and his daughter, a 12-year-old named Lily, who had Mom's exact jawline and didn't know what to do with her hands. I brought nothing but a box of Mom's letters, the ones Thomas hadn't seen yet, the ones from the years before she found him, that I'd discovered in a shoebox in her closet. He took the box and pressed it against his chest, like something precious. We talked for 3 hours. We talked about Mom and about our childhoods and about what it meant to discover a sibling at 41. There were awkward silences. There were moments that felt surprisingly easy. His daughter showed me a drawing she'd done in school, and I pointed out that her great-grandmother had been a librarian who would have loved her immediately. She grinned and she looked, for just a second, exactly like the woman I missed more than I knew how to say. Danny came around eventually. He always does. He's stubborn the way a door is stubborn. He swells up and sticks. And then the weather changes and he opens again. He met Thomas at Christmas. We did a strange, quiet, awkward holiday at my house. The 3 of us, Thomas and Sandra, little Lily who ate 2 plates of everything and announced that my stuffing was better than her other grandmother's, which somehow made everyone laugh. Mom would have loved it. She would have fussed over the table settings and cried in the kitchen and pretended she wasn't crying. I've thought a lot about why she didn't tell me sooner. About those 6 months she kept Thomas a secret while she was sick. At first it felt like one more betrayal layered inside the original one, but the longer I sit with it, the more I think I understand. She needed to know him first. She needed to meet him as herself, as Maggie, just Maggie, before she became someone's secret, someone's revelation, someone's family drama. She needed a few months where he was just hers. I think she'd been waiting 54 years for something that was just hers. I can be angry about that. I am, sometimes, in small waves that come without warning. But mostly, I understand. I found one more letter in that shoebox. It wasn't addressed to Thomas. It had no name on it at all. It was dated September, 2 months before she died, 1 month after the will revision. It said, I know this will be hard for Rachel. I know she'll feel like I lied to her whole life. Maybe I did. But I need her to understand. Keeping Thomas a secret wasn't about not trusting her. It was about not being able to say it out loud without becoming that 19-year-old girl again. The one who handed her baby to a stranger and drove home and pretended it didn't happen. I couldn't be her, so I buried her. I thought that was strength. I know now it wasn't. She left it there for me. That's the most Maggie thing she ever did, answering a question after she was already gone. Thomas texts me sometimes. Not constantly, just often enough. He sent me a photo last spring of Lily's school play. She had the lead, apparently. He said she'd been insufferably confident in rehearsals, and that Sandra said she got it from his side of the family. I wrote back, she got it from your mother's side. Trust me. He sent back 3 laughing emojis, and then, our mother's side. I stared at that for a long time. Then I saved the text. Our mother had a secret that she carried alone for 54 years, through marriage, through motherhood, through grief, through dying, and even at the end, she found a way to make it mean something. She gave me a brother I didn't know I needed, from the only place she had left to give from, her last breath. I found the second birth certificate on a Tuesday morning in March. It had our last name on it. But the mother wasn't me. The child was 3 years old. My husband had been working late for 4 years. Let me take you back. His name is Daniel. Daniel Marsh, 42 years old, financial analyst, coached Little League on Saturdays, grilled steaks on Sundays. He had this laugh, this big, warm, ridiculous laugh, that made strangers feel like old friends. Everyone loved Daniel. I loved Daniel. We met in Columbus, Ohio, at a mutual friend's housewarming party in 2012. I was 31, freshly promoted, a little burned out, and not looking for anything serious. He handed me a glass of wine I didn't ask for and said, "You looked like you needed this more than I did." I married him 14 months later. We built a life, a real one, a house in Westerville with a porch swing, a dog named Biscuit, 2 kids, Lily, who was 9, and Owen, who was 6, date nights every other Friday, a joint savings account, a shared Netflix password, and shared arguments about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. Normal. Good. Mine. The first red flag came in 2021, but I dressed it up as stress. Daniel had started a new role at his firm. More travel, more pressure, longer hours. We adjusted. Couples adjust. He'd be gone Tuesday through Thursday some weeks, sometimes longer if a client needed him in Chicago or Atlanta. He always called from the hotel. Always brought the kids something back. A snow globe, a Little League cap from whatever city. He was present when he was home. Fully present. That's what made it so confusing later. The second flag, his phone. He'd never been weird about his phone before. Left it on the counter, face up, never flinched when I picked it up to check the time. But sometime around spring of 2022, I noticed it was always face down, always on silent, and he'd started taking it into the bathroom at night. I told myself, he's managing a difficult client. Some deals are confidential. I believed that because I wanted to. The third flag was a name, Carrie. She texted him once while his phone was sitting on the kitchen island, and I glanced over, not snooping, just glancing, and saw the preview. Eli had his checkup today. Doctor says he's perfect. I asked Daniel about it that night, casually, while he was pouring himself a drink. He didn't even blink. Carrie's my colleague's wife. He's been dealing with some health stuff with their son. I've been checking in. He said it with the exact right amount of softness. Sympathetic. Believable. I nodded. I let it go. I was so stupid. Or maybe I just trusted him. I still don't know which one it was. The discovery didn't happen the way you'd expect. No dramatic confrontation, no lipstick on a collar, no stranger knocking on my door. It started with a filing cabinet. Daniel handled all our finances, taxes, investments, insurance. I never had reason to dig through his office files. But in March of 2023, I was looking for our car insurance paperwork because we'd been re-ended, and he was traveling, and I needed the policy number fast. I went into his filing cabinet, third drawer, behind a folder labeled MISC 2019. There was another folder, no label, just a plain manila envelope, tucked flat against the back of the drawer. Inside, a lease agreement for an apartment in Gahanna, Ohio, 12 minutes from our house. The name on the lease, Daniel Marsh and Caroline Voss. Lease start date, January 2020. I stood there for a long time. I couldn't feel my hands. I kept reading. There was more. A photo. Physical. Printed. The kind you get developed at a pharmacy of Daniel holding a baby. He was grinning, that big, warm, ridiculous grin. The baby had his nose. On the back of the photo, someone had written in pen, Eli, 6 weeks, November 2000, 2020. My son Owen was born in August 2020. Daniel was in the delivery room with me. He cried when Owen came out. He cut the cord. He held my hand and told me I was the strongest person he'd ever known. And somewhere across Columbus, there was a woman named Caroline who was 3 months pregnant with his other child. I sat down on the floor of his office, and I didn't move for 40 minutes. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't call him screaming. I didn't pack his things. I didn't post on Facebook. I didn't tell a single soul. Not my sister, not my best friend. Nobody. Because I knew something important in that moment. If I blew this up right now, I would lose. He would minimize, deny, lawyer up, and I would be the hysterical wife with no proof and no plan. I had one folder. He had 4 years of practice, lying to my face. I needed more, and I needed to be calm while I got it. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I photographed every document with my phone. I found the insurance policy, called the claim center, and went about my day. When Daniel got home that Thursday, I kissed him hello. I asked about his trip. I made pasta. I want you to understand how hard that was. I spent the next 6 weeks becoming a completely different person. I opened a private email account. I found a lawyer, not a local one, someone 40 minutes away in Dublin, who didn't know anyone we knew. Her name was Patricia, and she was methodical and calm, and exactly what I needed. Patricia told me what to document. I documented everything. I found the Gahanna apartment on Google Maps. I drove past it twice, weeks apart, always during the day, always with a reason to be in that part of town. His car was there. Both times. On days he told me he was working from a client's office in Worthington. I checked our credit card statements going back 3 years. There were charges I'd never questioned. A restaurant I didn't recognize, a Target in Gahanna, a pediatric dental office in New Albany. Small things, invisible things, until you were looking for them. I also quietly talked to our accountant. I didn't tell him why. I just asked him to walk me through how our accounts were structured, what assets we had, where money was moving. Turns out, Daniel had a separate savings account I didn't know about. $47,000. $47,000. He had been building an exit fund, or a parallel life fund. I still don't know which. I took pictures of everything. I kept a log with dates and times. I was meticulous. I was furious, and I never let him see a single second of it. The confrontation came 6 weeks later, on a Saturday in May. The kids were at my mother's for the weekend. I had arranged that deliberately. I made Daniel his favorite breakfast: eggs, sourdough, coffee. I sat across from him at our kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together at a furniture market in 2015, and I watched him eat. Then, I put my phone in the center of the table with the photo of him and Eli face up. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I said, "I want you to know that I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to yell. I just need you to know that I know everything, and that everything that happens next is in my hands, not yours." He started to speak. I stopped him. I slid a folder across the table. It had a summary my lawyer had prepared. The lease, the credit card charges, the separate savings account, documented dates when he'd lied about his whereabouts. It also had a draft of the divorce filing. His face went completely white. He said, "Nicole, please, the kids." I said, "The kids are exactly why you should read every page of that document very carefully before you say another word to me." Here's what Daniel didn't know. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets get divided fairly. But fairly can be argued, and because he had been hiding income in that private account, my lawyer was able to argue financial misconduct. That $47,000 became part of a larger pattern. He also didn't know that I had spoken very carefully to one of his firm's HR representatives about an anonymous compliance concern. I hadn't accused him of anything at work. I had simply asked, in a roundabout way, about the firm's policy on undisclosed personal relationships with financial conflicts. That's all. It was enough to plant a seed that, later, became a very uncomfortable investigation. Daniel had been handling an account for a company where Caroline Voss was employed as a contractor. There was no formal fraud, but there was an appearance of impropriety that his firm took very seriously. He didn't lose his job, but he lost his bonus, he lost his standing, and he lost the promotion he'd been angling for 2 years. He hired a lawyer. His lawyer called mine. They negotiated. I got the house. I got primary custody of Lily and Owen. I got a settlement that covered their college educations and then some. Daniel moved into a smaller apartment, not the one in Gahanna, because Caroline had already left him by then. Apparently, when he told her the marriage wasn't going to quietly dissolve the way he'd apparently promised her it would, she was done. He lost both of us. He lost the life he'd built with me and the shadow life he'd been running on the side. I felt something the day the divorce was finalized. Not happiness exactly. Not relief. It was more like clarity. Like I had been living inside a fog for years and hadn't known it until the fog was gone. Lily asked me once, about 6 months later, why Dad didn't live with us anymore. I told her that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, and that what happened wasn't her fault, and that both her parents loved her completely. She seemed to accept that. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. I think she already understood more than I'd said. Owen still doesn't fully understand. He's 7. He thinks his dad just lives somewhere else now. Someday I'll have to explain more. I'm not looking forward to that day. But I'll handle it. I handle things now. I've learned that about myself. People ask me sometimes if I wish I'd found out sooner. Honestly, I don't know. If I'd found out in 2020, I would have been blindsided, raw, reactive. I might have made decisions driven by pure pain instead of strategy. I might have walked away with less. Legally, I might have shattered in ways that would have taken longer to put myself back together. Finding out the way I did, in that quiet office on a Tuesday morning, gave me something unexpected. Time. Time to breathe, to think, to build something before I burned anything down. I'm not saying the anger wasn't real. It was the realest thing I've ever felt. But I chose what to do with it. I still have the porch swing. Biscuit still sleeps at the foot of my bed. Last summer, Lily taught Owen how to ride a bike in our driveway while I watched from the porch with a cup of coffee, and I thought, this is still my life. He didn't take it. He tried to live 2 lives, and instead, he ended up with none. The man who thought I'd never find out forgot one thing. He forgot who he married.